Hello and thanks for joining us. I'm Sonia Goins. There's a good chance you know someone who has Crohn's or colitis. In fact, 1.6 million Americans have the digestive diseases. Joining us now to tell us more about inflammatory bowel disease is Dr. Byron Vaughn. He's a gastroenterologist with the University of Minnesota. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell me, what exactly is inflammatory bowel disease?
Great question. So it's basically what its name suggests, that there's inflammation going on in your GI tract. There's a lot of things that can cause inflammation, like medications or infections, but inflammatory bowel disease is when there's inflammation, but we don't know what it's going on. Our best understanding of the disease right now is that for some reason our immune system is attacking the gut bacteria that lives in our intestine and in our colon, and that results in inflammation.
Well, and I know there's tons of different symptoms too.
Yes. So the way I like to think about it and describe it to my patients sometimes is to imagine that you had the worst sunburn that you ever had on your skin or on your arm. Well, that's what's going on in your colon or your small intestine. You have redness, swelling, and leaking of fluid, and all of that can end up leading to diarrhea, blood loss in the stool, abdominal pain, and abdominal cramping.
And a lot of folks are tired, and many people cannot, on the outside, you can't tell that someone's sick.
There's a couple reasons why people could have fatigue, and it's important if you have fatigue to talk about it with your doctor, because sometimes it's just because you have inflammation. When you have the flu, you have a lot of inflammation in your body. Similarly, with either Crohn's disease or colitis, you have a lot of inflammation, and that can wear you down. But there are some specific things too that can cause low energy with Crohn's and colitis. Iron loss is really common when you have bleeding. Even if you don't see blood in your stool, you're probably losing some microscopic blood, and over time that can actually deplete your stores of iron in your body. You can also, in Crohn's disease, become anemic, have a low blood count because of a low vitamin B12 level, which is a common nutritional deficiency in people with Crohn's.
Well, and speaking about Crohn's and colitis, what is the difference between the two?
That is a very difficult question, and to be honest, it's hard to really know because we don't know what causes them. I think there's about 10 to 15% of cases that we actually can't tell if it's Crohn's disease or colitis, but there are some generalities where they fit into specific patterns. Crohn's disease can actually affect your intestine anywhere in your body, from your mouth all the way down to your anus. Ulcerative colitis is limited just to the colon, occasionally sometimes getting the very last part of your intestine. Both diseases, we don't know what causes them, and so the main treatment is to try to turn off the immune system or suppress the immune system. Sometimes with ulcerative colitis, people need to have surgery to remove their colon, and that can be curative, whereas Crohn's disease, there's no cure, and surgery is not going to stop Crohn's disease. It'll most likely come back where the surgery occurred over time.
I know, like with myself, with Crohn's can also affect other parts of your body, like your eyes.
Absolutely. So even though the inflammation is in the intestine, for reasons we do not understand, there can be these extra-intestinal manifestations of Crohn's disease. So eyes are a very common one. Joints are another very common one. Joint symptoms in particular can tend to flare when your disease is active. Your liver and skin can also be involved. So almost every organ in your body can actually be affected by these diseases.
Now, is it hereditary or?
It is somewhat hereditary. It's really interesting. There's over 150 genes that have been associated with either Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, which is a lot. And yet it's not a guarantee that if you have Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, you'll pass it on. In fact, even if you're an identical twin who has Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, at most there's only about a 50-50 chance that your other twin will have it. So there does seem to be a genetic component, but there's clearly something else that's triggering inflammatory bowel disease.
And it could be the environment too.
And the environment, people have hypothesized it could be diet related, and like I said, a lot of people think right now it may be tied to the gut microbiome, which is influenced by diet and your environment.
Wow. So what are some things to treat the symptoms of Crohn's or colitis?
So I think one of the most important things is trying to understand what's causing the symptoms. Sometimes it's inflammation in the colon. And when it's inflammation in the colon, after you've ruled out infections, because people with Crohn's and colitis also can get infections as well, the management is usually to suppress the inflammation with medications. But sometimes people have symptoms and it's actually not due to active inflammation. In Crohn's disease, it could be due to scarring from the Crohn's and actually leading to obstructions. Or it could be related to a post-inflammation irritable bowel syndrome. And so in those cases, giving people immune suppressants could put them at risk when they really may need other more focused therapies.
And what should the general public know about this disease? Can you catch it?
No, you can't catch it, at least not to our knowledge, and it doesn't seem like that will be changing anytime soon. I think just an increased awareness will help it. Because these are GI illnesses, they tend to be not socially acceptable to talk about, and so people can be really suffering with weight loss, malnutrition, inflammation, joint pain, and people may not understand what's going on. And so having an increased awareness about it in society so that if you know somebody has Crohn's, you may understand that they have to use the bathroom more frequently, or they may need some time off work, or they may need to have an office located near a bathroom, things like that.
Okay, last question. I know you're really big into research at the University of Minnesota. Is there anything on the horizon that's kind of hopeful?
There are a lot of things on the horizon that are hopeful, and I think that's one of the things in the past decade. We've seen a lot of new medications come out for both Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. And there continues to be a lot of research support from both the government foundations, such as the CCF, and industry to investigate new drugs. And I think also looking at targeting the intestinal microbiome, the gut bacteria that live in us, is a really interesting avenue, and a lot of research is looking into how exactly that can help people with Crohn's and colitis. We're not there yet. We don't know how to use the gut bacteria for good, but a lot of people are looking at it, and I think over time we will see some new therapies come out of that area.
Well, we really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Anytime. Happy to be here.
Okay, thank you. We'll be right back. Crohn's and colitis can be life-changing, and many times the diseases are debilitating. Joining us now is Mitch Denzi. He was diagnosed with Crohn's in 2011. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so I know you were diagnosed in 2011, but your symptoms started way earlier, right?
They did. My symptoms first started as I can remember, is in the spring of about 2009. And it started with having to go to the bathroom a lot more, you know, kind of the typical having diarrhea more, having some pain in your abdomen all the time, kind of being tired, run down a little bit more easier than I usually was. But I always thought it was like a flu bug, so I kind of just kept it to myself for a while, thinking, oh, my body just needs some time to fight this one off, and I'll be good to go in a couple months. But it just kept hanging on, and, you know, kind of getting worse, and, you know, having to make more bathroom trips, and the urgency to the bathroom trips really went up, and I finally caved in, told my parents, I'm like, something's wrong, you know, I don't feel right. And we kind of shopped around at some different places, like nutritional things, thinking it was something that in my diet that I had to change at first, and tried that for about a year and a half. Then we finally went to the clinic to figure something internally is wrong. So I kept getting falsely diagnosed for C. diff and C. difficile, and that's kind of a bacteria imbalance in your gut. And they just kept putting me on antibiotics for that and saying, oh, well, these will kick it, they'll get rid of it and everything. And it just wouldn't get better, and we finally went to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester and had a colonoscopy and endoscopy and a bunch of other tests, and finally got the diagnosis of Crohn's disease.
Wow, when you heard the words, okay, I have Crohn's disease, what went through your mind? Did you even know what it was?
I had no clue what it was. I had never heard of it. I remember my mom mentioning just one time, just asking the question, well, do you think it's Crohn's? And it didn't even faze me at the time. I'm like, well, I didn't know what that was, so it couldn't be important, right? I mean, but yeah, I had never heard of it. Part of me was relieved. Like, there was just a wave of relief that came over me to finally say, I know what it is and I know what I'm fighting. And then the other part was, okay, Crohn's disease, now what's that? What's that gonna entail? You know, am I gonna be able to take a magic pill and get rid of it in a week, and, you know, antibiotic or anything like that? But I didn't know at the time, but it'd be a tough road ahead.
Yeah, I know. Reading your profile, you play sports and stuff. How has this impacted your sports and stuff?
Yeah, so I was playing a ton of sports all the way up through my freshman year of high school. Kind of when everything started to go wrong. I'd been wrestling for 10 years, and that was probably the sport that I was most avid in. And, you know, just the toll that it takes on your body at the beginning where I was, and, you know, barely even being able to keep food down at the time. And the end of my wrestling season, I lost over 60 pounds in about a month and a half. And it was just the toll that it took on your body was just incredible. And it was to the point where you could barely go to school and get up in the morning. And I just sat down with my parents, we kind of discussed, and I just couldn't do it anymore. And so I stopped doing all my sports going into my sophomore year, and that was definitely really hard because that was a huge part of my life.
Wow. I know, like, even though this is a physical disease, I know it's mental too.
Yes, definitely. I didn't realize it as much at the time, you know, it was more a physical going through high school and everything, but lately still kind of fighting active symptoms. It's been more of a challenge on your brain and kind of the will to keep fighting and keep going, and, you know, keeping that faith that there is going to be something that's coming that's going to help you out, but it's just waiting until we get there is the long haul of it.
Yeah, but you're pretty strong. He just finished a half marathon. You did grandma's, right?
I did a full marathon, actually, yeah. So I signed up for Team Challenge for my first year it was about a year ago, around this time, and signed up to do a marathon, and I had no clue why I was signing up, but I knew there was fundraising involved and advocating for the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, so I'm like, you know, that's another angle. I've never been a part of that, so I really want to give it a shot, raise some more money, and do something that is a pretty big accomplishment for, you know, anybody to run a marathon, but yet to have an active chronic illness is to do that when you're actively flaring is.
Yeah, crossing the finish line had to be remarkable.
It was a indescribable feeling. Just the overwhelming amount of, I finally did it, you know, I accomplished this. I set in my mind that I was going to do this, and I did it. You know, training was 3 months long, and to finally reach that goal that you had in your mind the whole time was indescribable. It was amazing. It
doesn't sound like you're going to let this disease, you know, dictate how you're going to live your life.
You know, I've wrestled with this before, and I was in a low spot for about a year after being diagnosed. You know, I didn't really do much with friends, didn't do much with school, kind of came to school, came home. That was kind of my routine. Kind of hid it from everybody, you know, because it was embarrassing, you know, having to run to the bathroom all the time and having to get up and leave certain situations to have to run to the bathroom all the time was really kind of exhausting all the time. So I kind of put myself down the hole, you know, kind of made my own world and didn't really do much. And then it was almost like a light switch flipped in me one day and said, you know, this is going to be around for the rest of your life. Now, why not, instead of moping out about it, why not, let's do something about it. Let's make a difference, you know. I was the only one I knew at the time that had IBD, and I'm like, there's got to be more people out there. So then I started doing some research and found the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, and here we go with the first walk and Take Steps walk, and I formed a team, and we were up there in 2013 for the first year, and I've been up there ever since. It's been a blast.
Well, that's great. I know we're going to talk to a expert coming up about all the volunteer possibilities, but what would you tell somebody who was like recently diagnosed with Crohn's disease?
I think the biggest thing that I would have wanted to know right after I was diagnosed, just the fact that you're not alone. You know, it may seem like it at the time, and it does really feel like it at the time, but you're not alone. There's so many people in the same boat that you are, and so many people that do know what you're going through, and talk to them, get out there. Don't be embarrassed by it, you know, you can't control it, so rise up and, you know, make the best of it.
Oh, perfect. Well, we really wish you the best, and thank you so much for sharing your story.
Definitely, yeah, no problem. It's been my pleasure.
Okay, well, we'll be right back. You don't have to fight Crohn's or colitis alone. There are many resources available through the Crohn's Colitis Foundation. Jim Thrubus is the Take Steps manager for the Minnesota Dakota chapter. Thank you so much for joining us.
Sonia, thanks for having me.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways you can get involved with this chapter, right?
Yes, there absolutely is. We have a variety of different events and fundraising opportunities for folks to get involved. Primarily patients themselves, caregivers, but also family and friends have also come out of the woodwork to really support the foundation.
Now, I know you have several programs. One's called the Power of Two program.
Yeah.
What exactly is that?
So Power of Two program is a mentoring program for patients and caregivers to connect with a volunteer that has been through a similar experience. So we have volunteers that fill out some paperwork, tell us a little bit about their story, what disease they're dealing with, Crohn's or colitis, some of the things that they've had to deal with, if they've had surgeries, what kind of medications, things like that. We try to match them to specific patients that want a one-on-one relationship instead of a support group instead.
Now, I know earlier we talked about the Take Steps. For me, I'm like, this is the event you want to do because it's walking. So tell me, what's involved with that?
So Take Steps is a family-friendly event. Typically we have folks that sign up as a team and they come out with their families. There's no fundraising minimum, but we have folks that come out every year and raise funds for our mission. One of the nice things is I always try to make it just a special day for patients. Folks go through so many negative things. They have negative experiences every single day because of these diseases, and I try to make that day a positive one.
Wow, and I know you know about Team Challenge.
Yes.
That's my personal favorite,
Absolutely.
by the way. So tell me about Team Challenge. What's involved with that?
So Team Challenge is a life-changing event that folks are involved in. It is a half marathon destination program, and folks will train along with other Crohn's patients or folks that are caregivers or supporters of Crohn's patients and colitis patients, and they raise funds as well. But they get to travel all over the place. Napa, New Orleans is the next one that's coming up. Las Vegas, I know you've been to the Las Vegas race a couple of times. And it's a great way to push yourself while also raising funds to support a good cause.
And speaking about funds, all of these events raise money for research. Can you talk about that and how much money goes into like trying to find a cure for Crohn's and colitis?
Absolutely. So last year our foundation, in 2016, our foundation donated over $30 million in research. Here in Minnesota alone, since our chapter was founded in 1978, we've invested $35 million in research in our state alone. Starting at the University of Minnesota, and then even more recently with the Mayo Clinic, we concluded a 4-year study that was about $255,000 a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Now, Minnesota is also one of a handful of states that has the so-called bathroom access card. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so back in 2005, a Crohn's patient that was living in Illinois, her name was Allie, was denied access to a bathroom when she needed to use it. And so her and her mom, as a fallout from that experience, decided that they never wanted an IBD patient to have to live through that again, as well as other folks who need to use the restroom because of a disease. So they went to their congressman and they started to build a law. And now, I think as of April of 2013, 14 states adopted that law, including Minnesota. And if you are a member of the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation as a patient, you get a card that it says on the back, "I can't wait," and it explains exactly why you need to use the restroom and explains it's the law.
Right. And now I know the Crohn's Colitis Foundation also has support groups, not only for adults, but for pediatric patients.
Yeah. So we have 9 support groups throughout Minnesota and the Dakotas, and our most active one is the pediatric support group here in Roseville at our chapter offices. They meet once a month, and they average about 20 to 30 patients and caregivers. And I've had the pleasure of going to one of the pediatric support group meetings, as well as others throughout our chapter territory. And it is really great to see all the kids come out and they kind of get a chance to see their friends from Camp Oasis and some other places, while parents and caregivers get to talk a little bit more about the diseases.
And you personally, why do you get involved with this? Why is this so important to find a cure and to get involved with CCFA?
It's interesting. So I am not a patient myself. The connection I did have was a family friend of ours and their daughter were both Crohn's patients. My mom, when I was growing up, would explain to me why Jesse wasn't in school and what Crohn's disease was, but I didn't really understand what it was because they were private about it. And I think as time has changed, people have become more open in talking exactly about how these diseases impact them. I'm motivated by this because of the people that I work with. The patients, the caregivers, they are some of the most optimistic, positive people in the world, and it really gives me an appreciation for my health, and I only want to use my talents to help benefit them in the long run.
Well, we really appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you guys.
Okay. Before we go, I want to remind people to not let Crohn's or colitis dictate how you live your life. Fight to be well, join a support group, or volunteer with the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. We have all that information on the screen. Thanks for joining us.